like my garden so free. You can live in this garden if you keep the grasses green. And I'll return in the cool of the day. Now is the cool of the day. Now is the cool of the day. Oh, this earth is a garden, the garden of my Lord. And we walk in this garden in the cool of the day. That wasn't quite planned, but it seemed appropriate songs. These those are the good feeling. In 1973, a movie came out called The Sting. And in 1974, I left the Bahamas and went to Boston to study music. And I heard, of course, this music. And it was the first time I'd ever heard ragtime. In fact, it's probably the first time that many people heard ragtime. And there was one piece in particular that always struck me and that I loved. And about a month ago, I was in Los Angeles. I was visiting my friend Mark, and we were playing music for each other. He pulled out some Scott Joplin music, and he played a number of different pieces. And he said, "And this is my favorite piece." And you know what it's like when somebody says that and you know it's exactly the same piece that you loved? So it got stuck in my head, and I came back and I thought, well, we're doing this concert, and I really want to learn this piece on the guitar. And so I found a transcription of this piece, and appropriately enough, the piece is called Solace, a Mexican Serenade. grew up in the Bahamas, and I grew up in a storytelling tradition, in the tradition of the enslaved Africans who were brought to my country, in the tradition of the griot and the Jali of West Africa. And in that tradition, I want to tell you a story. Ogalusa was a hunter. And Ogalusa went out one day to hunt with his spears and his shield, but he did not return home. The next day, his children went out to the fields, and they came back home, and they had their meal of manioc and cassava, but they did not think of their father. Now, when Ogalusa left, his wife was pregnant with a child. And when that child was able to speak, the child's first words were, "Where is my father?" "Oh, yes, father. He went away some time ago." "I know how to find the path that may find where father is," said the oldest child. And so he led them along the path until they came to a clearing. And there they found Ogalusa's bones on the ground, scattered about, and his rusted spears and his shield. One of the children said, "I know how to put bones in the right place." And he put all the bones in the right place. The other said, "I know how to put muscles and sinews to attach the bones," and that he did. The other said, "I know how to put skin to make a body," and he made a body. And the other said, "I know how to put blood inside the body." The other said, "I know how to give the body breath and life." And Ogalusa stood up, gathered his spears and his shield, and they followed their father home into the village. And he killed a cow and went into his room for 5 days, which was the custom of one who has come back from the dead. And he took with him the tail of that cow. And on the 5th day he came out with a beautiful, adorned cowtail switch with copper wire and colored beads. And people said, "Ogalusa, what a beautiful switch. Who will you give this switch to?" And Ogalusa said, "I will give this switch to the one most responsible for bringing me back to life." "Well, that should be me. I found the path." "Well, no, I put the bones back together." "Well, no, but I put the muscles and sinews in the bones, and well, I put skin over the bones to make a body. But I gave the body blood. But I gave the body breath and life." And Ogalusa said, "I will give this switch to the one most responsible for bringing me back to life. I will give this switch to my youngest son, Puli, for it was he who asked the question, 'Where is my father?' And they say that one is not dead until one is forgotten." I came to Boston in 1974 and started playing music with a group. I want to sing a song for you now that comes from the tradition of the Sephardim, the Jews of Spain. For 15 centuries, the Jews, the Arabs, and the Moors lived together in Spain. And in 1492, a date we all know, the Jews, the Arabs, and the Moors were expelled from Spain. The Jews continued traveling throughout the Ottoman Empire looking for a homeland and found many places to live. But the thing is, they kept their music alive for 500 years before it was written down. It was very much a tradition of lullabies. They call it the kitchen tradition because mothers would sing to their children in the kitchen and grandmothers to their grandchildren. Or they would sing these lullabies that had 50 and 60 verses. I won't do one of those tonight. Just a few. And the language they spoke in was the first Spanish that I ever actually learned, which is a medieval Spanish called Ladino. And if you speak Spanish, you'll understand most of the words. There are a few things that are different. The pronunciation of the word, some things are different. Hijo instead of hijo. Abrimesh instead of abrime, open for me. Vista instead of vida. Mucha instead of mucha. Little things like that. to sing a song for you now called Nani Nani. It's a lullaby. No more than 30 verses. Nani nani, nani quiere il ligio della madre, de chico se haga grande. Te mi vista, dormite mi ama, e tu madre viene con mucha alegría. Nani quiere ligio della madre, de chico se haga grande. Ay, avrimesh mi abrimesh la puerta, que vengo muy cansado de arar las huertas. Nani ligio della madre, che il chico se haga grande. Ay, la puerta yo no abro, que venís cansado y veréis dormido ligio en la cuna. I think a lot about memory, especially when I'm learning 3 new pieces for a concert like this. We all think about memory. I want to tell you a story. There once was a little boy. His name was Wilfred Gordon MacDonald Partridge. And he wasn't very old either. He lived next to an old folks' home, and he liked all the old people there. He liked Mrs. Jordan, who played the organ. He listened to Mr. Hosking, who told him scary stories. He played with Mr. Tippett, who was crazy about cricket. He ran errands for Miss Mitchell, who walked with a walking stick. And he admired Mr. Drysdale, who had a voice like a giant. But his favorite person of all was Miss Nancy Allison Delacour Cooper, because she had 4 names like he did. He called her Miss Nancy, and he told her all his secrets. Now one day Wilfred Gordon overheard his parents talking about Miss Nancy. "Poor thing," said his mother. "But why is she a poor thing?" "'Cause she lost her memory," said his father. "Well, it stands to reason. After all, she is 97. Well, what's a memory?" "A memory? Well, boy, memory's something to remember." This did not satisfy Wilfred Gordon. So he went off to find out what a memory was. He went to Miss Jordan. "Miss Jordan, what's a memory?" "A memory? Boy, memory's something warm. Something warm." He went to Mr. Hosking. "Mr. Hosking, what's a memory?" "A memory is something from long ago, long, long ago." He went to Mr. Tippett. "Mr. Tippett, what's a memory?" "Well, son, a memory's something that makes you sad. Makes you sad." He went to Miss Mitchell. "Miss Mitchell, what's a memory?" "A memory's something that makes you happy." Went to Mr. Drysdale. "Mr. Drysdale, what's a memory?" "Boy, a memory's something precious as gold." And so Wilfred Gordon went off to find some memories for Miss Nancy, because she had lost hers. He found a shoebox under his bed filled with shells that he found a long time ago last year. And he put those in a basket. He found a marionette that made him laugh, and he put that in the basket. And he found a medal that his grandfather had given him, but his grandfather never came back from the war, and that kind of made him sad, so he put that in the basket. He picked up his football, which to him was as precious as gold, and on the way to Miss Nancy's, he stopped at a hen's house, and he picked up some warm eggs, and when he gave Miss Nancy that basket, she looked at that basket and said, "What a strange, dear boy, to bring me all these things." She picked up the shells, and she held it up, and she remembered how when she was a little girl, she went to the beach with her button-up boots and how hot it was. She picked up a warm egg, and she remembered the speckled hen's egg she found in her aunt's garden when she was a child. She looked at that medal and remembered with sadness her big brother who never came back from the war. She picked up that marionette, and she remembered how she had a marionette and how she made her sister laugh with her mouthful of porridge. And she and Wilfred Gordon threw that football back and forth to each other. And she remembered the first time they met and all the secrets they told. And then that little boy and Miss Nancy sat and looked at each other and smiled, because Miss Nancy's memory had been found by a little boy who wasn't very old either. programs, I always do my favorite pieces. Problem is that, we have a limited time, each of us, and so I can only do a few of my favorite pieces. But they are my favorite pieces. I'm going to end the set with a piece written by John Williams for a movie called Schindler's List. And it's been one of my all-time favorites for a very long time. Just a little side. When I grew up hearing stories, and my grandmother was one of the people who really influenced me as a storyteller, because my grandmother would tell the stories about, the true stories about people who came back from the dead and haunted you, sucked your blood out of your body and stuff. My grandmother, she was a midwife in the Bahamas, and she was just an amazing woman. And my grandmother had what I call the eye. And this is what I learned from my grandmother, not just about storytelling, but about time and space and everything. Because my grandmother, it didn't matter whether she was telling you a story or giving you a recipe. She had the eye. Child, you want to learn to make peas and rice? Well, listen. First, you got fried onion. Dry. It was my grandmother. She was very great. Just a little quick story before we do this. I wasn't supposed to break up that memory. Just remember that memory story. But just remember that makes me think of my grandmother because, my grandparents lived on an island in the Bahamas where there was no electricity, and they would come to Nassau to visit. And I remember one time they came. It was Olympics, the time of the Olympics, and my grandmother was sitting there. We were watching television. And we were watching Mary Lou Retton. You remember Mary Lou Retton? And we were watching Mary Lou Retton. My grandmother's sitting next to me. And we're just sitting there watching it. And they don't see much television. And then all of a sudden, the phone rings. And all of a sudden, they show her do her thing. And then they show it in slow motion. And my grandmother took her hand and put it on my leg and said, "Look, now she taking, she tied."